There is a word that has ended more conversations than it has started. A word that has driven more people away from faith than almost any doctrine in Christian history. A word that gets preached with a fist on a pulpit, or whispered as a threat, or avoided entirely because nobody wants to be the person who says it out loud in polite company. Hell. And here is the problem. Most people, including most Christians, have never once stopped to ask what Jesus actually said. Not what their tradition says he said. Not what a painting from the Middle Ages suggests he said. Not what a street preacher or a frightened Sunday school teacher communicated. What the man himself said, in his own language, to his own people, in their own context. Because when you go back to the original Greek of the Gospels, when you actually look at the words Jesus used, something happens that almost nobody is prepared for. He did not use one word for hell. He used 4 completely different words. 4 different words that most English translations collapse into the single word hell as if they were interchangeable. They are not interchangeable. They never were. And the difference between them is not a footnote. It is the entire argument. What we are going to do today is go back to the Greek, back to the Hebrew before it, back to the geography, the history, and the cultural context that every person Jesus was speaking to already carried in their minds when they heard these words. Because you cannot understand what Jesus said about hell until you understand what his audience heard when he said it, and what they heard is almost certainly not what you have been told. Let us start before Jesus. Let us start where the story of death and the afterlife actually begins in the Hebrew imagination. The word is Sheol. In Hebrew, Sheol. It appears 65 times in the Old Testament, and it is the foundational concept, the bedrock idea, underneath everything else that gets built on top of it in the New Testament. Sheol is not hell. That translation is a mistranslation that has caused centuries of confusion. Sheol is the realm of the dead. All the dead. Not the wicked dead specifically. Not the punished dead. All of them. In the Hebrew worldview that shaped Jesus and every person he ever spoke to, when you died you went to Sheol, righteous and unrighteous alike. It was the common destination of the dead, a shadowy underworld of waiting, of diminishment, of separation from the land of the living, and from the full presence of God. Psalm 89:48. What man can live and never see death? Who can deliver his soul from the power of Sheol? Job 14:13. Oh, that you would hide me in Sheol, that you would conceal me until your wrath is past. That is Job asking to go to Sheol, not as punishment, as refuge, as a place of waiting until God's anger passes. Genesis 37:35. Jacob, believing his son Joseph is dead, says, I shall go down to Sheol to my son, mourning. Jacob expects to see Joseph in Sheol. He is not anticipating punishment. He is anticipating reunion in the realm of the dead. This is the picture. Sheol is not the fire and brimstone location of popular imagination. It is a holding place, a realm below, a place where the dead exist in a diminished state, separated from life and from full communion with God, waiting. This matters enormously because when the Hebrew scriptures were translated into Greek, a translation called the Septuagint, completed roughly 200 years before the birth of Jesus, the translators chose a Greek word for Sheol. That word was Hades, and by the time Jesus was born, every Greek-speaking Jew in the Roman Empire read their scriptures with Hades, where the Hebrew said Sheol, Hades, the second word, and in the Gospels, Jesus uses it specifically and deliberately. Hades in Greek mythology was the name of both the god of the underworld and the underworld itself. The realm of the dead that mirrored the Hebrew concept of Sheol almost exactly. A shadowy realm beneath the earth where the dead went regardless of how they lived. Not specifically a place of punishment, the destination of the dead. Jesus uses Hades 4 times in the Gospels, and every single time the context is specific and consistent. Matthew 11:23. And you, Capernaum, will you be exalted to heaven? You will be brought down to Hades. Jesus is not threatening the citizens of Capernaum with eternal torture. He is using Hades as the opposite of heaven, the lowest possible point versus the highest, a statement about humiliation and descent, not a description of flames. Matthew 16:18. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it. The gates of Hades, not the gates of a torture chamber. The gates of the realm of the dead. Jesus is saying that death itself, the holding place of the dead, will not be able to contain what he is building. The resurrection breaks the gates. Death loses its grip. Luke 16:23. In Hades, being in torment, he lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham far off and Lazarus at his side. This is the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, the passage most commonly cited to argue that Jesus taught conscious torment after death, and it is worth reading carefully. Because this is a parable. Jesus regularly used familiar stories and images from his culture to make theological points. The imagery of a divided underworld with different regions for the righteous and the wicked was not invented by Jesus. It was already present in Jewish literature of his time. The books of Enoch, the Testament of Abraham, 2nd Esdras. Jesus is using an image his audience already knows and inserting his own theological point into it. The point of the parable is not a geography lesson about the afterlife. It is a devastating indictment of the wealthy who ignore the suffering, poor at their gates, and a warning that no messenger, not even one risen from the dead, will convince someone whose heart is already closed. The fourth use of Hades is in Revelation 1:18, where the risen Jesus says, I have the keys of death. And Hades, the keys, he holds them. The realm of the dead is under his authority. Every time Jesus uses Hades, he is using the Greek word that his audience understood as the realm of the dead, the continuation of the Hebrew concept of Sheol, not the eternal torture location of medieval paintings. Now, we come to the word that Jesus uses most often when he is warning about something terrible, the word that appears 12 times in the Gospels, 11 of them from the mouth of Jesus himself. The word that has been translated hell more than any other, and has done more damage to the concept than anything else. Gehenna, and Gehenna is a place, a real physical geographical location. It exists, you can visit it today. It is a valley on the southwestern edge of Jerusalem. In Hebrew, it is called Gehinnom, the Valley of Hinnom. In Greek, Gehenna. In the Old Testament, this valley had a history so dark that it became a byword for horror in Jewish memory. 2 Kings 23:10, 2 Chronicles 28:3, Jeremiah 7:31. The Valley of Hinnom was the location where the kings Ahaz and Manasseh, the most corrupt kings in Judah's history, burned children as offerings to the god Molech. The prophet Jeremiah pronounced judgment on this valley specifically. He said its name would be changed to the Valley of Slaughter. He said it would be filled with the dead bodies of those who fell under God's judgment. By the time of Jesus, this valley had accumulated so much symbolic and theological weight that it had become the primary Jewish image for the place of final judgment. The Mishnah, the Talmud, the apocalyptic literature of the Second Temple period, all of them use Gehenna as the location where the wicked face God's ultimate reckoning. And here is the critical detail that most people in Jesus' audience already knew. By the time of Jesus, the Valley of Hinnom, Gehenna, was used as the garbage dump for Jerusalem. The city's refuse was thrown there. The bodies of criminals who had been denied proper burial were thrown there. And fires burned in Gehenna continuously to consume the waste. The smoke rose. The worms worked in the refuse. It was a place of unquenchable fire, not because fire was supernaturally maintained there, but because new fuel was being added constantly. It was the city's incinerator. This is the image Jesus reaches for when he warns about judgment. Not an abstract, spiritual dimension invented for the occasion. A location every person listening to him had seen, had smelled, had walked past. A valley of fire and decay on the edge of the holy city. Matthew 5:22. Anyone who says to his brother, "You fool," will be liable to the Gehenna of fire. Matthew 5:29-30. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to be thrown into Gehenna. Matthew 10:28. Do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear him who can destroy both soul and body in Gehenna. Mark 9:43-48. If your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. It is better for you to enter life crippled than with 2 hands to go to Gehenna, to the unquenchable fire, where their worm does not die, and the fire is not quenched. That last phrase, where the worm does not die, and the fire is not quenched, is a direct quotation from Isaiah 66:2-4. And it is describing corpses, the dead bodies of those who have rebelled against God, lying in a valley outside Jerusalem, being consumed by fire and worms. It is a picture of total destruction, of complete consumption, of ending. This is Jesus using Gehenna. He is warning urgently and repeatedly about a judgment that is final and complete, a destruction that does not produce ongoing life in agony, but an ending, a being consumed by the fire of divine judgment as completely as refuse is consumed in the valley. His audience walked past every time they approached Jerusalem from the south. Now, we need to pause here, because this is where most people have the most questions. Is Jesus describing eternal conscious torment, a state in which people suffer forever without end? Or is he describing destruction, a final judgment that ends in complete annihilation rather than endless suffering? This is one of the most serious theological debates in Christian history. And it is a debate that the text itself generates, not one that is imposed on the text from outside. The traditional view, held by the majority of Western Christianity since Augustine, is eternal conscious torment. The soul is immortal by nature. Judgment results in unending suffering in a state of separation from God. The fire does not consume. It perpetuates. The alternative view, held by a significant minority of theologians throughout church history and gaining significant scholarly attention today, is called annihilationism or conditional immortality. Immortality is not natural to the human soul. It is a gift. Those who receive it through Christ receive eternal life. Those who do not receive it face a judgment that ends in destruction, real, final, complete destruction, not ongoing torment. the fire consumes. The worm finishes its work. And what is destroyed is genuinely destroyed. The language Jesus uses points in complex directions. The unquenchable fire of Mark 9. The Greek word is asbestos, which means cannot be extinguished. Jude describes a fire that cannot be put out, not necessarily a fire that burns forever. Unquenchable means nothing can stop it, not that it burns without end. Jude 7 uses the same concept for Sodom and Gomorrah, described as suffering the punishment of eternal fire. But Sodom and Gomorrah are not currently burning. They were destroyed. The fire was eternal in its effect, final in its judgment, not eternal in its duration. Matthew 10:28 is possibly the most important verse in this debate. Fear him who can destroy both soul and body in Gehenna. The Greek word for destroy is apollume, to destroy completely, to ruin utterly, to cause to cease. If the soul is being destroyed in Gehenna, the traditional picture of ongoing conscious existence in torment requires significant explanation of what destroy means in this context. What is not in debate is this: Jesus takes final judgment with absolute seriousness. He speaks about Gehenna more than any other teacher in the New Testament. He uses graphic, urgent language. He says, it is better to lose your hand, your eye, your foot, than to face what Gehenna represents. Whatever Gehenna is, whether eternal torment or final destruction, Jesus treats it as the most serious reality a human being can face, and he treats the decisions made in this life as the decisive factor in facing it, the fourth word. And it appears only once in the New Testament. Once, in a single verse, 2 Peter 2, for Tartarus. For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into Tartarus, and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness, to be kept until the judgment. Tartarus in Greek mythology was the deepest region of the underworld, lower than Hades, the place where the Titans were imprisoned after their defeat by the gods of Olympus. It was the prison of the most powerful and dangerous supernatural beings, a place of chains and deep darkness reserved for cosmic rebels. Peter uses this word for one specific purpose, to describe the current state of the fallen angels, the beings who sinned before the flood, referenced also in Jude 6 and Genesis 6. They are not free. They are not wandering. They are in Tartarus, in chains, in darkness, awaiting judgment. Peter is not describing the afterlife destination of human beings. He is describing the imprisonment of a specific category of supernatural rebels held in custody until the final judgment. This word appears nowhere else in the New Testament. Jesus never uses it. It is not offered as the destination of human souls. It is a specific term for a specific category of imprisoned beings awaiting a final reckoning. 4 words: Sheol, Hades, Gehenna, Tartarus. 4 completely different concepts, 4 different references. And most English Bibles translate all of them, or most of them, as the single word hell, a word that carries 2,000 years of medieval imagery, theological argument, artistic embellishment, and cultural baggage that was not present in any of the original languages. What does this mean? What do we do with this? The first thing it means is that the conversation about final judgment is more serious and more honest when it is conducted with precision. Jesus was precise. His language was precise. The 4 words are not synonyms. They describe 4 different realities, and collapsing them into one word flattens something that the original text preserves in careful detail. The second thing it means is that the popular picture of hell, the medieval torture chamber of Dante's imagination, the place of red demons and pitchforks and eternal screaming, is not found in the words Jesus used. It is a cultural accretion that accumulated over centuries, and was then read back into the text as if it had always been there. It was not always there. The third thing it means is that the questions the text raises are genuine and open. Whether Gehenna describes eternal conscious torment or final destruction is a question serious theologians have disagreed about for 2,000 years, without either side being able to claim. The text is entirely on their side. What is not open is whether Jesus took final judgment seriously. He did, urgently, repeatedly, with graphic language and direct warning. And here is what I want to leave you with, because this is where the doctrine stops being academic and starts being personal. Jesus did not talk about Gehenna to terrify people into compliance. Look at the contexts. Matthew 5, he is talking about the seriousness of anger and contempt. The way treating another human being as worthless carries a weight that reaches into eternity. Matthew 10, he is telling his disciples not to fear the people who can kill the body, because there is a deeper reality, a higher accountability, that puts all human threat in perspective. Mark 9, he is talking about the radical seriousness of anything that leads you away from life, the willingness to cut off whatever pulls you toward destruction. Every time Jesus uses Gehenna, he is speaking to people he is trying to rescue, not people he is trying to frighten into performance. He is saying, what you do with your life, what you do with other people, what you allow to pull you away from God and from love. This matters with a finality that cannot be overstated. The valley of fire on the edge of Jerusalem was the most visceral image available to communicate the weight of a choice made in this life. He is not a medieval torturer presiding over a dungeon. He is a shepherd describing what lies at the bottom of the cliff, so that the sheep understand why he is asking them to step back from the edge. The God who said, "Your will be done," in the Garden of Gethsemane.